Folks, we're actually on live. Perhaps you could just wave at me if you can hear me okay. There you go. I'm being heard. That's really wonderful. I know we've got a few more people actually connecting with us. Today I'm actually on with Helene King, who's up in Scotland, in Edinburgh, as they say, and really excited to be hearing from Helene. We're actually in Mississippi, because we actually have done some meetings here this week, and things are gradually opening up here in America, which is nice. We've done a little bit more traveling, of course that's encouraging. Last week we were in California, and the real reason why we're in California is to see our son, our eldest son David, who's getting married in July. So we had to go and sit down and talk about plans, and I'm actually officiating his wedding, so we're really excited about that. And of course they're really, really looking forward to this. So we had a wonderful time with David. The only downside in California was that the weather was not quite as good as what it normally is, but we're thankful. We're back in Mississippi. We actually lived through what was going to be a tornado on Wednesday night, but fortunately it kind of went around us, but the weather really was quite bad. I actually posted some pictures of lightning actually on our Facebook page, and you can check those out. It was pretty, we had a pretty spectacular lightning show on Wednesday evening. Helene and I are going to continue talking today. Last week, we spent quite a lot of time, myself and Shannon, talking about forgiveness. And one of the aspects of forgiveness that we were talking about last week, just to recap, was obviously the story, the parable in Matthew 18 of the servant that comes to his master and he's in debt to his master and him being forgiven. And the aspect of that story that we really focused on last week, that I believe is so important in the process of forgiveness, is us receiving the compassion from God to the person that we're trying to forgive. And that is such an important ingredient in us being able to cancel the debt, to forgive that person. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. This week, I'm going to talk about another aspect of the story, but I just want to read to you again the first part of this story. And I don't think we can underestimate in any way the importance of forgiveness in our walk with God, in our Christian walk. I think it's absolutely vitally important. If you like, it's like kind of the premier issue. If we're going to have a open, loving relationship with the Father and really come to know God as our Father, those issues of forgiveness, those blocks, if you like, in our hearts, the Father really wants to work with us in seeing those resolved. So I want us to turn to the book of Matthew, Matthew chapter 21, and I'm just going to read part of this parable because it's only essential that I read part of it. But starting in verse 21, then Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times, Peter said. Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he began to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. Sorry about that. I'm just going to have to turn that off so it doesn't interfere anymore. Who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he was unable to pay, his master commanded that he be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and that payment be made. The servant therefore fell down before him and said, Master, have patience on me, and I will pay you all. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him his debt. Now, the aspect that we were talking about last week was this really important ingredient of us having compassion. And that really is the basis, if you like, the point where God really comes to meet us in our hearts in terms of our perspective towards that person's situation. And I told you some stories actually about my life. But the second really important ingredient, and I don't think these are in any sort of order, they're just the way I'm actually picking them out. The second most important ingredient is what I would call understanding what was stolen from us. Now, when things have happened in our lives, when situations have occurred, we've ended up feeling hurt. We've ended up with pain, disappointment, and often judgment and anger towards the people that have actually hurt us. And that is normal for all of us. That happens in all our lives, in various situations. A lot of those situations have happened in the formative years in our lives when we were growing up with our parents, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that is very clear in this particular story is that the king knew exactly what was owed him by and from his servant. He had an amount of money, he'd kept the records, and he knew exactly what was owing to him. Because he's lost it. That's been taken away. It's not there anymore. It's not sitting in the account, if you like. And when I've come to understand and really get a perspective about forgiveness, one of the things that I've really come to see and understand is really understanding when it comes to forgiving somebody is really coming to understand what was taken away, what was stolen from me. Now that's important because a lot of us just live with the residual of the pain or the effects of the pain because of the incidents that have taken place. Yet some of us, and myself very much included, I didn't understand what was taken away, even though I know something was stolen. And that's a bit of a crazy situation to be in, isn't it? You know we're angry with someone. We know we're disappointed with someone. We're upset with someone. Why do I react when that person is talked about? Or why do I react when that person comes into my presence? Why do I react like that? And often we don't fully understand what it was that was actually taken away from us. And one thing that I've started to realize and understand is that in this area is that I've really come back to the Father and asked him. I said, God, I know that I'm upset with this person. I remember there was one particular person in Sweden. Of course, I'm not going to mention the person's name. And I remember situations that happened back in like 1992, 1993, when I was actually ministering in Sweden quite a bit. And when I went back to live in Sweden in 2012, and this person's name came up, all of a sudden I have that reaction on the inside of me, that sense of injustice, that anger, that disappointment. And then what that would actually produce in me is that I would start to be judgmental and critical about that person. That was my kind of retaliatory reaction to that situation. But I then started to realize that something happened in 1992, 1993 that really upset me, it hurt me. Something was actually taken away from me, but I wasn't sure exactly what it was that was taken away from me. So one of the things that I did is that I asked God, I said, well, what was it, God? Because it was like a part of my heart was taken. A part of my heart was blocked off. My reaction to this person is obvious that a part of my heart has been really impacted by this particular man. And it's still affecting me to this day. all those years I wasn't in Sweden, of course, I didn't realize there was an issue until that person's name comes up and that person starts to contact me again. Well, I asked God, I said, what is it that was stolen from me? And in that process, I started to really have understanding and revelation, if you like, on really what it was that was actually taken away from me, that was stolen from me. And that became clear. It became very, very clear. And in that clarity of what was stolen, so I understood the amount of what it was, that became the basis in which I could really come to God and really forgive him and saying, X, Y, Z was stolen from me. I felt it go. I felt the effects of that on my life. Therefore, Father, I forgive this person for what this person has actually taken from me. And it's going to be interesting because I know Helene is going to share a couple of stories about not what we know or the very things that have happened, but the things that we perceive have actually happened before. And even those perceptions in our heart have actually caused our heart to be blocked in our relationship with God in the whole area of forgiveness. And so I was praying through this week and looking through this. And one of the things that has really helped me is going right back to the Garden of Eden. And what's interesting when I, in my own heart, go back to consider what it was actually like in the Garden of Eden, is that it's really helped me to have a healthy view, a perspective of the way God intended it. That's the way it was before the fall. For instance, Adam and the woman were living in an absolute perfect environment of love, acceptance, approval, peace, and all these other attributes and realities that we think about now. But often when we think about peace, we long for peace because we know what it is not to have peace. Well, I'm not sure if Adam knew what peace was because he lived in the full manifestation of peace. He never knew what peace was until he lost it. And that has really been a helpful perspective for me to look at this and to understand this. Because now what I can see is that in my own upbringing, and of course, none of us have been brought up in a perfect environment. I believe that I had a really good father, but it wasn't perfect. And none of our situations were perfect because we're all brought up in situations where our parents are broken, our families are broken, and we know that broken people hurt people and they become broken. And that's part of the reality of living in this fallen world. That's why it's so essential for us to have a revelation of who God is as a father, because when that happens, then our perspective starts to change. And so in understanding what was stolen, I look back in the Garden of Eden and I look and I consider my own life. And one of the things that I spent a lot of time looking at in my own heart is my own need for acceptance, my own need for approval. And when I take that and I put that back into the context of the Garden of Eden, I realized, well, hang on a sec, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and the woman understood what it was like to be completely accepted. There was no sense at all of any rejection, any disapproval. There was perfect acceptance and love until they ate of that particular fruit. And all of a sudden, the environment, the world in which they lived, their environment changed. And all of a sudden, something was lost. that they didn't have. So in my own heart, I realized that, hang on a sec, why am I longing for acceptance? Why am I looking for acceptance? And one of the reasons for that is because I realized I lacked it. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming my own parents or my own father, but that was an area of lack in my life. And what was taken away from me, what wasn't given to me, was that lack of approval and lack of acceptance. So I started to understand what was stolen from me. And in me understanding that, me coming to that place and the understanding of that, that was a huge component in me coming to this place where, hang on a sec, my father accepts me. My father approves of me. And that was clear because it was something that was actually taken away. And I think Ganilla's story, I was talking to Ganilla this morning as we were eating breakfast. I'm not sure if Ganilla will actually share anything today or not, but she may do, but she's given me permission to say this. But some of you know Ganilla's story, and that her mother died when she was turning 14 years of age. And of course, that is a very, you're coming into adolescence, your body is changing, the world is changing, everything is changing, and all of a sudden a mother dies. And she's left with her father, who's just broken by what has happened. And the whole emotional setup of her family completely changed. And it became very, very difficult for Ganilla, and obviously affected her and impacted her life. And I said, Ganilla, I said to her this morning at breakfast, I said, what was taken away from you? What was stolen? Now, I've heard her say this before, but I just wanted to just chat about it with her. He said, well, what I lost was my confidence. What I lost was my security. Now, that's huge. That's really huge as a teenager, coming into, maturing and growing and everything else. That's so huge. And that leaves a huge deficit in her heart. But in her forgiving her father, that was the light that she needed. That was the revelation that she needed in terms of how it impacted her, in order for her to come to this place of saying, I forgive you, Dad. Because I was actually there in the bedroom with my father-in-law, Ganilla's dad, when the last time I saw him was, and Ganilla actually referred to this a few weeks ago, was that I heard him say to Ganilla, I love you in Swedish, which is Jag älskar dig. And those of us that have lived in and know about the Scandinavian culture, you don't just throw around that term. To say Jag älskar dig is a very strong, impacting statement because it has a huge implication to it. Here in America, we just say I love you to everybody, so it doesn't have the same meaning. Whereas in Sweden, when you say it, in Scandinavia, when you say that, it has a profound implication. And I saw him, my father-in-law, reach out and put his hand on Ganilla's face and say, Jag älskar dig. But what I also knew was the process that Ganilla had actually gone through in her own life, because she understood that her confidence had been taken away, the consequences of her mother's death and what happened to her father, and the insecurity that created in her life. And she understood that security and confidence were taken away. I understood that approval and acceptance were actually taken away from my heart. And the truth is, my friends, wherever we're watching, wherever we are today, is that the things that we struggle with, we're often blinded by them. That it's almost like a fog. We know we're upset. We know there's pain there. We know there's something going on in our lives. And we know that the Father's after it, that the Father's pursuing us in that area. But often there's a lack of clarity in us knowing exactly what was stolen. Now, the last aspect of forgiveness that I'll talk about next week is canceling the debt. But if we put this into the context of that, we cannot forgive the debt until we know what has been stolen, until we have clarity about what was stolen. And most of the people that I rub shoulders with, talk to, minister with, Father Heart Ministries and beyond, most people, as they've processed forgiveness, they've actually had the revelation and the insight of what was stolen. And because of that, that has been the foundation, the place in which they've actually been able to forgive. Now that, knowing what was stolen, understanding that, coupled with the compassion that we talked about last week, that video is actually on our YouTube channel and our Facebook channel as well. When I was sharing with Shannon, those two things coupled together lay the foundation in our hearts as we are walking with the Father to be able to cancel the debt. But I'm going to spend more time talking about canceling the debt next week, because that's the point where that transaction is dealt with. That issue is resolved, if you like. And let me say this, it's important to say this in the context of forgiveness, that most of the things that have happened in my life that have really hurt me, where I've had to forgive, I still have memory of them. I still have a recollection of them. I still have a memory of them, but I don't have a pain associated with that memory. And that is the difference between knowing the forgiveness has worked its way out and as the process has happened in our hearts, and the difference between that not happening. Because I have the memory and there's no pain associated with the people that have really hurt us, which I believe is a healthy place. It's coming into maturity. Now, every single day, every week, we have opportunity to forgive people, don't we? Because there's stuff happening around us in a broken, fallen world. What is stuff happening? And it seems to me like God gives me an opportunity every day to be able to forgive somebody. But I think that's true for a lot of us as well, because He's continuing to work. We work in our hearts, and we're continuing to walk with Him. What's different now in my heart is when situations happen that have happened before that have hurt me, they don't impact me. I'm able to walk away. I'm able to forget them. I'm able to just live out sonship. I believe in the way that the Father really wants us to walk out sonship. I want us just to pray over this, and I want to give Helene just plenty of time. I know that she's got something on her heart, and I want to give her plenty of time to share. So let me just pray, and then I'll hand over to Helene. Father, I ask you very specifically this morning, this afternoon, wherever we are watching this, that as we are considering this and looking at this, Father, that you would open the eyes of our understanding. Father, you would show us what it was that was taken away from us, and that we would know that when it comes to the point of us canceling the debt, we would have very, very clear insight about that. And so, Father, just let your love just brood over our hearts and brood around our lives in this process, that we would really know what it is to walk in deep forgiveness, heart forgiveness, with the people that have hurt us, with the people that have actually impacted our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, it's just great always having Helene King on with us. And Helene's with us this afternoon from Edinburgh. I love the way people from Edinburgh say Edinburgh. And so, Helene, I want to give you an opportunity to share. It's great having you, and go for it.
You know, it's very beautiful to me to see your names and your faces up there. And it really touches me very deeply. And I want to begin by saying this. I believe that there is deep inside each one of us a river of revelation. And what we're looking at during this Zoom meeting is, what is it within us that stops the river flowing? You see, many people say to me that they need their mind changed and then their heart will be healed. But I see it very, very differently. I believe that when our heart is healed and restored, it gives us a new way of thinking. You know, I grew up as a little girl with an absent father. It wasn't his fault. He was out playing football one day and he tripped and he ended up by breaking his spine, and he was in hospital for a long time. And so the thing is, he also worked for the government and carried an air of authority. He was very reliable and very hardworking. But my mum also told me that she'd been brought up in a boarding school. But when I was a bit older, she told me the truth. She says, I wasn't brought up in a boarding school. I was brought up in a children's home. And she found it very difficult to show emotion. She was very passive, and I don't ever remember her being angry. But what I loved about my mum is when I was older and out for a night with my girlfriends and I'd come home, she'd have coffee and sandwiches beside my bed and she'd come in and talk with me. But as I became a Christian, my understanding was of God that he was a distant father and one of authority, a bit like my dad. And the feminine side of God was not revealed to me as reliable because not able to bring comfort to me. It was not my parents' fault because no one can give to someone else what they've not first received themselves. And I wonder, you know, when Andy was reading that verse from Matthew about forgiveness, how many times do we need to forgive? How many times have you and I wished we could have done things differently? And I believe that heart forgiveness has something to say to us about having the heart of a son. And when I say son, I mean daughter as well, because we're beginning to move into sonship in a way that the church has never seen. But we've often been misled about what forgiveness is. When many people say it's a choice, and what it implies is that it's a decision of the will, but that is not heart forgiveness. I want to tell you a few stories about my journey with people through life. I met a young girl, she was about 21 when I met her, and she told me that she had been sexually abused as a child. And we were part of the same church, and the minister said to her, you need to forgive and forget. But that is not possible. You see, it's not possible just to forgive and forget. And often that I'm beginning to discover is that the wounds of a mother go deeper even than the wounds from a father. Why? Because mothers are the most important emotional connection for every single one of us. We come from within our mother's bodies, so their importance in our lives is huge. But one of the major issues of this is if a person does not forgive from the heart, they cannot experience the Father's love, who of course is mother and father to each one of us, because we're made in his image. You can have a touch of the Father's love, but we cannot go into a deep relationship with him because there is still the whole issue of being fathered or mothered that is not resolved in our heart. Forgiveness from the heart means that we need to look at, like Andy said, what was stolen from us, and also what we didn't get, and also what we perceived was done to us as children growing up. I'll never forget how I discovered this word perceived, because one of the young people in the ministry, she said to me, one day, I need to speak to you. Now, she was about 14, and I had a sudden word of knowledge. I know what you're going to tell me. And I said to her, if you tell me anything that puts your life in any form of jeopardy, I am duty bound by the law to report it. And she says, I still want to tell you. And she said to me that her father sexually abused her. So I had to report it to the authorities. And ended up getting a social worker came to me and said, we've discussed this with this girl, and we want to tell you we actually examined her and she has not been sexually abused. Her dad can be kind of childish and tickly and things like that. But she taught me that she perceived something has happened to her and it hadn't. You see, we need to look at what, like Andy says, what it really cost us. And I believe that we need to go to do this in the process of coming to terms of what was stolen from us and what we needed as a little boy or girl growing up. And it's getting down to the very ground of our being, getting down to the basic foundation of who we are in our heart. Our heart is the gut of our being, where all the shadows are exposed, and it's the real you crying out. You see, who we are in the ground of our being, who we are in the ground of our heart is who we really are. And I don't know about you, but all of us have worn masks because we want to do the right thing. But I'm not talking about the masks for the virus that we're all wearing just now, but I'm talking about the masks that we put on to cover certain things. We want to look good in front of other people. We want to be intelligent before other people. We want to be beautiful before others, or whatever it is. But this is a real tragedy because it is not the real us. The cost of what has been stolen from us, like Andy says, goes right back to the Garden of Eden. You see, I'm realizing if we have not forgiven our mother or our father from the heart, it seems that it's not possible for us to have a deep relationship with God from the heart. We can have a mind connection with God, but we really need a deep connection in the core of our being. You see, I can't begin to say how important it is for our lives. It is not possible for any one of us to have true intimacy because of the blockages in us that prevent us moving into a deep relationship with God himself. And forgiveness, when I heard James Jordan say this, I thought, oh my goodness. He says, forgiveness is not forgiving one thing after another. It's forgiving our father or mother or anyone who sinned against us for the whole thing, because they could not give us what we needed more than anything. It's forgiving the whole thing. Why? Just because they couldn't give what they'd not received. And I'm coming to understand, until we have compassion on our mother and father, we will never be free. And compassion is we forgive them for their mistakes. It's not forgiving ourselves. It's about forgiving them. And do you know something? If we don't do that, we will never be free. They were broken people, and we can begin to have compassion on their brokenness. We forgive. Why? Because we love mercy. James chapter 2 says this: mercy triumphs over judgment. So while we're judging everybody, we're never going to have a merciful heart. And forgiveness means never, never, never getting back what was stolen from you and what you didn't get. You cannot be paid back from what was taken from you. And just for a few minutes, I believe it's important to look at, and Andy's going to take it further next week, exactly what we lost and did not receive. And what exactly is it that we're forgiving? Forgiveness does not give you back what was taken from you, because true forgiveness expects nothing back. James Jordan tells this little story about I've got a purse or a wallet and it's lying on the table, and somebody notices it and takes £10 out of it. And then they come and confess to me, I've taken £10 out of your purse. And I say, it's only £10, it's okay, I forgive you. But what they didn't tell me was they took my credit card and used all the money up on my credit card. And I did not know about it until a month later. You see, I couldn't forgive them for the whole thing because I didn't know about it. Now, I want to tell you a little story about somebody I met who'd been sexually abused by her father. And what was stolen from that little girl was she lost a place of belonging. She lost respect. She lost love. She lost basic trust, especially of men. She lost her innocence. She lost her childhood. She lost good relationships because she did not trust anyone. She did not receive from her father what she so needed, the pure love of her father to her. And I believe it's so important for all of us to count the cost, because only then are we in a position to forgive. If we don't, we can demand repayment from someone who can never repay because they were bankrupt. They didn't have the resources to repay. What do we want? That, or do we want to cancel the debt? You see, my parents could never repay what I felt they owed me. And I had a real dilemma. Do I forgive and cancel the debt and let it go, or do I demand justice? Jesus says this, "Forgive us, Father, as we forgive others." The forgiveness and the honouring of my parents unblocked my heart and brought me to a place of blessing and rest in my life. Forgiveness means never, never, never getting back what you were robbed of. Why? Because forgiveness cancels the debt and expects nothing to be returned. I remember saying to Denise Jordan years ago, as you know, the founder of Father Heart Ministries, and I knew her story. And I said, Denise, I want to ask you a question. How do you know when you've forgiven? And she said this, when it doesn't hurt anymore. How do you know when you've forgiven? When it doesn't hurt anymore. My friend who'd been sexually abused by her father, when she told me she'd forgiven her dad, she says, Helene, I've forgiven my dad. And I says, may I ask you a question? Does it still hurt? She says, yes, it does. And when we were talking together, she suddenly remembered something she'd forgotten. And she remembered going to her dad and saying, why did you do this to me? And I said to her, what did your dad say? And he said to her, you never told me to stop. He put all the blame on this little girl. So I think it's important that we look at what we've been robbed of in life, of opportunities, of innocence, and so many things. And sometimes we hold our parents or relatives or church leaders or friends as debtors who owe us and who should be made to pay for it, and for depriving us, for being cruel and demanding of us. You see, a wounded child always demands repayment. You do this for me. But when they cannot do that, you think there's something wrong with you. But when we begin to forgive, we have to look, I keep saying this, at what was lost or stolen. We need to count the cost. Forgiving what was stolen from us, or what we never received, or what we perceive was done to us. You see, unforgiveness imprisons us and keeps us in torment and in a place of unrest. And we live in turmoil and inner conflict. You know, in the book of Malachi, we read this. Jesus wants the hearts of the children turned to their parents and the parents to their children. But perhaps they can't do that. You see, I've discovered something, that heart forgiveness makes you feel very light on the inside. So I want to just ponder a couple of things, and then I want to share something very personal. My prayer is that all of us would come to forgive what was lost or stolen from us and what we never got as a child growing up. You know, my dad was authoritative. He broke his spine, but he had a built-up shoe. And I will never forget, I was married, I was living in my home, and I had a friend visiting me from another country, and he had a built-up boot, and I heard him coming down the stairs. And I was completely freaked out. And after a while, he says, "Why are you so horrible to me?" And I realized it wasn't him. He reminded me of my dad when I heard him coming down the stairs. You know, when my friend went to her dad and said about all the things he'd done, and he said to her, he put the blame on her, he says, "You never told me to stop." I can't begin to believe how important this it really is. And I believe we need to have a heart of compassion. And that is very briefly what heart forgiveness is. But I want to share something that is very real to me right now about heart forgiveness. This happened yesterday. I received a phone call, and the phone call was from my technical support, you know, my internet. And they spent a long time saying, you know, the internet's not very good in your area, and it's not. And they said, we'd like to check things, and we're going to give you a new router. So he says, would you mind going to your router, put your phone near it? And we talked through a lot of this. And then they said, we are really sorry that we've not been fair with you. And so we'd like to give you a gift, a refund of money to make up for the poor quality of service that you've got. And so I had to fill in all this form online and everything else. And so I stupidly gave them some of my bank details because they were going to give me a refund. And at the end of the whole conversation, the man that was speaking with me, after I'd done this, said, "This is a scam." So I had to go to the bank and say, you know, please, something has gone wrong here. I've been scammed. And the people in the bank said to me, do you realize that this is happening an awful lot during this COVID time? But she said, let me see your bank details. And we looked in it, and she says, the bank realized that this was a fraud and a scam, so they blocked it. So they didn't get a penny from me. But it was the gullibility of me to believe them. You see, and I looked up the dictionary a while ago, and I thought, what is gullible? Someone who is easily persuaded or deceived. And that's what I thought. I was quite a straight person. So then I came to the thought, when I realized nothing had been stolen from me, and I counted the cost because I thought half of my little savings had gone. And then I thought, we're talking about heart forgiveness. What do I do with this company? And in the bank, the woman said to me, one of the managers said, did they have a foreign accent? I said, yes, they did. And I said, but you've got a foreign accent. So how does that work? And she laughed and she said, you're right. But so I've been thinking since yesterday, I have to forgive. I have to forgive what was lost or stolen. I'm getting a bit emotional here. They didn't steal anything from me, but my trust. And so I've realized one thing. When my landline goes and it comes up, it came up today, we want to talk to you about something you got from Amazon, and I put the phone down. because there's a lot going on out there. And the only way we will have peace internally is to have a wisdom and understanding. This is so important, like James Jordan talks about. We need not just the wisdom of what's going on, but the understanding of it. And during this big, long discussion with these guys, I didn't have that. So one is I've had to forgive them. See, if we don't walk the way of forgiveness, we will never have a light spirit. We will be weighed down and rooted and grounded in, oh, poor little me, and it doesn't work. Because you see, through all of this, we need to move into a measure of freedom such as the world has never seen. And as we journey on through life, may each one of us experience having a light spirit. You know, Bartimaeus went to Jesus and Jesus said to him, and he was blind, what do you want? And I found myself, I want a light spirit. And to have a light spirit, I need to let things go. But I'm also asking not to be gullible anymore. So I just want to bless you for listening. And I would like Andy to pray for us, because I need his prayer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Helene. That was really good. For those of you that wonder what a pound is the currency in Britain. Some of you might be used to krona or dollars. So I just needed to say that, Helene, but that was really fantastic. I just want to spend just a few moments just praying and just inviting God just to really work in our hearts. I honestly, Helene, I really think there's been a very, very strong anointing on that today, because it was so real. What happened yesterday with the bank was so real, and unfortunately that's happening all around the world. Especially, I know it's happening in Britain and it's happening in the States as well, and happens in Sweden. So I just want to spend some time praying. And I think I perceive one of the things that's probably been happening this morning as we've been doing this is that things have been coming up in our hearts, and we've been thinking about situations, and we've been starting to see them perhaps from a different perspective. Now that is healthy. That's very, very healthy, because when God shows us something, it's because he's lovingly wanting us to draw us into a place where we really can forgive. So I'm just going to pray. I'm actually not going to take us through the prayer of forgiveness. I don't think that is appropriate, but I just want to pray, and then I'm going to just open things up for perhaps a few of you just to share. So Father, I just thank you so much for this testimony and story of what you're doing in Helene's heart and all our hearts right now, Father. And I thank you, Father, that you are in one sense digging and you're working in us. But I thank you for as well, Father, that you're working in the context of love. You're coming in a very loving way to reveal to us issues and areas in our hearts. And I pray very specifically for areas in relation to our own parents, our fathers and our mothers, where things have been stolen. Father, I ask you, Father, for the grace to be able to forgive them, both our fathers and our mothers, so that area of blockage in our own heart, in our relationship with you, we will be completely dealt with and sorted in a very, very special way. So do that, Father. Do that over these next few days. Do that over just as we're processing these things through. And give us moments, give us those beautiful moments with you when you literally arrest us, arrest our attention, and something comes to the surface and we're able to process that with you, Father, so that we really come to the fullness of everything that you want us to have in terms of our lives. Amen. Amen. Just before I open it up for a couple of people to share, I just want to say hi to a few people. We got My dad's with us from England. We've got a bunch of people, our friends from Denmark and from Norway. Our leader in Ghana's with us. John, perhaps you could give us a wave there. In West Africa, good to see you, John. I've also got another friend from Ghana who's actually online with us, but is not showing his face. It's great to have you. We've also got Jacqueline, her husband there. Jacqueline was just on the A school in Myrtle Beach. Where was it? It was Myrtle Beach. But also Jeff. Jeff, perhaps you could wave to us. Jeff's actually in Cyprus, in the wonderful island of Cyprus. So that's great to have you on this morning, Jeff. And we really appreciate all you guys. Sue Dorks is there from England, just outside London. Good to see you, Sue. I'm forgetting your names as I'm saying them. But I just want to we've just got a few moments left. Perhaps Ganilla, you might want to add something. Do you want to add anything? No, she's okay. She's sitting out there on the patio with a scarf on, keeping warm. It's cold in Mississippi. So I wonder if any of you have just got very brief testimonies in how God has really worked in your heart in the area of forgiveness. We want to stay on point. And if there's any specific things that you'd like to share, 1 or 2 minutes, just wave at me right now. Obviously, we can't do this for people on Facebook, watching on Facebook, but we can on Zoom. So if you want to say something, just wave and we'll open your mic up. Did you wave at me, Sue? Okay. Wow. Nobody wants to speak.
Hello.
Who's that?
That's Hilly.
Oh, Hilly. Yeah, I saw you moving towards your computer, but I wasn't sure.
Oh, you were not sure. Okay. I waved and somebody muted me.
Yeah.
But, yes. Something special happened a while ago for me personally on the area of forgiveness. I was going through a kind of trauma and processing it, and I was really on a walk outside and thinking about how to forgive this. And I asked the Lord, and I said, I actually don't know what it means to forgive this, because I'm not yet there. I can't even see it in the right way. Or like you were telling about, you can forgive when you know what you have lost. And so I was thinking about it, and I said, Lord, I don't know how to do this. Just I give it to you. I want to forgive, but I don't know how to do it. And I feel I can't. And I was just walking further, and about half an hour later, I was on a bridge, standing still, and I felt like a prayer came in my heart. And it was just praying about the person, that the right people would come onto his way, that would show him, the love of the Lord in a way. And so it was really wonderful to see that was something that I couldn't do, or I couldn't think about at that moment, but the Lord just put that in my heart after I had done that prayer. So I was really thankful for what the Lord did there. And
That's great.
It felt like a miracle.
Yeah. But what's beautiful about that, Hilly, is the Father does that. He doesn't stand apart from us to deal with the forgiveness issue. He's not standing like a schoolmaster saying, you've got to do this before I accept you. He's working with forgiveness in our hearts in that whole process. And that's really the beautiful thing of it, is revelation of who God is as a father to us. He's right there with us in the context of our hearts and what we're dealing with and what we're working through. So thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Anybody else? Just wave at me if you want to share something. Okay. Well, we're very quiet today, but it's okay. And I understand it might be personal. We're actually live, so we completely understand that. We're going to be on again next week. Thankfully, we're going to be back in South Carolina, so we're excited about that because we're actually getting to move into a new home soon. And Ganilla and I are all kind of really all excited about that to happen. We're actually off down to Florida to see some friends tomorrow for a few days, and we're going to get to see the beach and the ocean, which we're really excited about. And then we're on again next Saturday morning, Eastern time. At the moment, it's going to be midday, but in Europe, it's 4 o'clock. In the UK, 5 o'clock in Central Europe, and I think that's 6 o'clock in Cyprus. And the other times in Africa are the same as the UK, if I remember correctly. It's really great having you on. I just want to show you our website. We've got a YouTube channel, and on our YouTube channel, we've got today's teaching is actually going to be there. So they're all there, and all these Zoom calls that we've done are actually on there. So there's certain topics that we've talked about. You can join up, subscribe to that, and you can rerun them again. Also, our Facebook page, I put things on our Facebook page probably every other day, just keep people informed what's going on, the ministry that we have going. And then our website is rttn.org. And there again, our itineraries there, what we're doing. We've got a men's conference coming up in South Carolina with our home church, New Day Community Church. That's going to be like the second part of April, I believe. All the details are there. And if you'd like to give, I know some of you have given, really do appreciate that. And there's a little give button there. That's where you give. So you just fill out the form, put your credit card details in and do that. Great, Scott. Thank you so much. So thank you guys for being with us. Great to see your happy faces, and have a great rest of the day wherever you are in the world. And really looking forward to being with you again next week. God bless.